Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, officers and members, and welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting of the 24th of September. First of all, I must give you instructions about evacuation in the event of fire. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. You go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is webcast live on the internet. And please, mobile phones, can you all switch the phones off or turn to silent? Thank you. For the benefit of the members of the public attending, I would like to explain who everybody is around this table. My name is Councillor Donald Sherlock, and I'm the chairman of the committee, and Councillor Anne Court is my deputy. Down the sides of the table to the left and right are the councillors who sit on this committee and who will be making the decisions on the applications this evening. Immediately to my left and right are the officers who will be advising councillors. Along the back and under the windows are those councillors who are not on the committee but have asked to present their views, as well as additional officers who may be called on to help councillors. In addition, I would like to explain that the Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be looking at the evidence brought before us tonight, and we will make a decision based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning guidance and policy. And I fully understand that planning can be emotive, and I ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout the evening. I also ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to return to their seats once their presentation is complete. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and ask members to keep any comments on each item to a maximum of 4 minutes. Thank you. Now, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have Councillor Goodison is replaced by Councillor Miller. Otherwise, I think we're all here. Do I have any declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Urgent matters. I would just point out that item 7, the Tesco thing, has been withdrawn. So if there's anybody here who came to listen to it, they can be very pleased and go home. Item 7 and 8. There's 2 in the Chilham. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And just two other announcements under item 3. First was to make the committee aware in terms of the Chapel Hill proposal, which came to the last committee meeting. There's a resolution to grant planning permission subject to further discussion with the local ward members and the chair of DC committee regarding off-site highways works. It was just to inform the committee that that meeting has taken place, and with Councillor Mr Franklin as well, and have reached a conclusion which involves some amendments to the scheme in terms of the off-site highways works under the bridge, but also some in principle agreement around Section 106 contributions, reflecting the fact there'll be a feasibility study around HGVs potentially not going under the bridge as well. So that effectively has been moved forward since the last committee meeting, and through the delegation given by the committee to the DC chair, the application can then forward to approval without coming back to DC committee, subject to that Section 106 being signed. So it's just to confirm that that's where that had got to. The other announcement was to say members may be aware that the Razors Farm appeal decision has come out. It came out yesterday. The appeal was allowed and costs awarded against the council. My intention was to cover that in more detail when we get to paper C, which is the quarterly appeals report at the end of the agenda.
Thank you, Mike. We move on to item 4, minutes of the committee meeting held on the 27th of August. Are you happy, members, that I should sign these? Agreed, thank you. Now we move to the applications for planning, and we start off with item number 1, the yew tree in Andover Road, Highclere. And we have got speakers for this in the form of John Stoker, Mark Thackeray, and Councillor Faulkner. And I'll ask you to come up to that microphone there, and you will get 4 minutes each, and I'll give you a warning of 1 minute each. But first of all, officers will present the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the change of use of land to create garden to the rear of the public house for use associated with the pub, erection of a timber external bar servery and timber shed to form waitress station, associated landscaping and external works. On the update paper, there is no update, but there are a couple of typos in condition 1. Drawing number 2 was actually received on the 14th of the 4th, 2004. And condition 8 need to remove reference to recognised public holidays.
Right, may I have John Stoker, please? You have 4 minutes. I'll tell you when you've got 1 left to go, and you press the long black bar on the machine. Okay.
Good evening. I'm representing Hollington Cross and the occupants of Highclere Street, who are also affected by this development. I've lived here for 37 years. I would like to object on the areas of noise, flooding, parking and road safety. The Yew Tree is a gastropub on an island site lying between Zellhouse Lane, also called Bartlett's Down Lane, and the A343 Newbury to Andover Road. There are a total of 95 seats, 75 inside and 20 outside. There are currently no problems with noise and the car parks just about cope. Noise. The plan is for a further 80 seats outside in the garden at the rear of the pub. These seats are arranged in 3 blocks. The main block of 40 seats is placed next to Zellhouse Lane and as close as possible to the nearest house. Grouping tables in this manner produces far more noise because the customers have to compete with nearby tables to be heard. The licensing hours stop at 10 p.m. However, noise and lighting pollution will continue much later because garden customers will be able to buy drinks inside the pub and take them outside. Noise rises up the hill to Highclere Street and affects those people. The proposal for an acoustic barrier by the lane will offer no noise protection unless it's extended. Flooding. Work was carried out at the Yew Tree to prevent flooding in September 2013. It flooded 3 months later, just before Christmas. The problem is the underlying impervious clay soil. Parking. The pub's current infrastructure, notably parking and sewage, cannot deal with an extra 80 covers. The car park is often full. Last week, the number of cars at about 9:30 p.m. in the evening was as follows: Tuesday 19, Wednesday 20, Thursday 22, Friday 32, Saturday 28, and Sunday lunch 23 cars and 6 motorbikes. On last Friday evening, both car parks appeared to be full. 1 extra car was parked on the grass, 1 on the lane, and 1 in the driveway of Hollington Cross Farm. Where will the cars generated by an additional 80 seats in the garden be parked? There is no off-road parking on either Zellhouse Lane or the A343. Next to the pub, the lane is a single carriageway, 11 feet wide, used by lorries and cars. Since it services Ashmansworth and Fackham, it's narrow, unlit, and there is no pavement. The applicant's own study shows that 80 customers require 30 car spaces. If this is extrapolated, 95 customers will require 37 car spaces. There are already 95 seats available inside and outside the pub. 2 car parks provide 31 spaces. Additional parking for 6 cars, totaling 37, exists at the side of the A343.
1 minute.
However, vehicles parked there interfere with the line of sight from the busy junction of Zellhouse Lane onto the main road, with lorries and cars travelling past at 60 miles an hour. It would be unrealistic to expect a company not to maximise its number of customers. More seats will require more parking spaces. The development with its servery and grill is more suited to a large town or city centre where there's a high level of ambient noise rather than a quiet rural area. As one elderly resident said to me, it would be like having a noisy party next door all day, every day. We would ask you to refuse this planning application.
Thank you, Mr. Stoker. Can you switch off? Thank you. Now, members, questions for Mr. Stoker? Have we any? No? Yes? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming along and speaking tonight. I'm just a little concerned where you say this acoustic barrier needs to be extended. Could you please enlighten us? Thank you.
My understanding, looking at the plans, was that there's an acoustic barrier which looks like a sort of wattle fence, I understand, and it would be behind the main block of tables, which would be on the map there. You could see it on the top side towards Zelhouse Lane, and it would finish, you see, well before the house. So it'd be rather pointless putting it there. Except it would obviously ensure that the diners didn't have too much noise from the lane, because they would be very close to the lane.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Stoker. Now, Mark Thackeray, please. Mr. Thackeray, you have 4 minutes. I'll let you know when there's 1 minute to go.
It's already on. Good spot. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I represent the applicants. I would like to say that from the outset, this is you've got before you a very comprehensive report, and we're very grateful to the officers. It's perhaps unusual that an application for a garden should involve not only the planning officers, but the highways officers, the environmental health officers, the conservation officers, the landscape officers, and they've all worked very hard with us to try and make this a successful proposal. And I think that's reflected in the report before you, which has addressed, I think, for the most part, the comments made by residents and repeated this evening by Mr. Stoker. There's a certain, I think there's a certain element of double counting on the numbers of seats, in the sense that Mr. Stoker referred to 75 inside and 20 out. If you that drawing there, if you were quick enough to count them all up, you'll see that the 80 seats he refers to are on that whole drawing in various blocks, but the 20 in the top right hand corner are the 20 he refers to as already being there. So the new element of seating is 40 in one corner and further 18 in the smaller building to the bottom, so it's 58 in total. That said, we are talking about furniture. It is movable, and we would have every intention of working with our neighbours. If they felt that the distribution of the seating was giving a problem, then we're quite more than happy to agree numbers, agree locations. It's the nature of the beast that garden furniture can be moved. Similarly, with the acoustic screen, if your officers have made a recommendation and they've given in the informative, very specific guidance as to how to construct an acoustic screen, height-wise and thickness and the timber involved. If guided by your environmental health officer, it was felt that the extent of the screen was not sufficient, then that too is something which we're more than happy to address with a condition. But we do feel that what we've proposed deals with the situation. The car parking, again, there was a point during the consideration of this application when the highways officer was concerned that the level of parking was not sufficient, but we've worked with him again to satisfy his requirements as far as the car parking is concerned. You'll see what the nature of the problem is from that photograph there. It's a
1 minute, Mr.
thank
Thackeray.
you. It's an open car park with no markings on it at all. So cars park haphazardly, and a car park that can get 20 odd spaces looks full when it's got a dozen in it. The proposal is to regularise that, not with tarmac or anything unpleasant, but with marking out of the spaces so that customers know exactly where they are supposed to park, and we can meet the requirements for the number of spaces. And the other thing I'd point out is that with a country pub, most country pubs have gardens. It's an exception rather than the rule, I think, this one that doesn't have a garden. But the nature of the beast again is that just because you've got a garden in the summer doesn't mean the pub itself is going to be full. People will drift outside into the garden because it's a pleasant space, and the pub is often left quite empty on a pleasant evening. So
Will you bring it to conclusion?
yeah, so
now?
I think this application has taken us a long time to get in front of you this evening, and I'm very grateful for the officers, and I hope you will endorse their recommendation and approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thackeray. Do we have any questions from members for Mr. Thackeray? For Councillor Frankham.
Yes, I'm not really sure whether, because I think the timing, I'm a bit concerned about the hours on the timing, but I've got a feeling that would go to licensing. But in the meantime, would you have any movement on the hours of opening?
It's already been to licensing in August, and the license has been granted. And the recommendation before you this evening is for hours that coincide with what your colleagues on licensing have already granted, which is basically 9:30, I think, to stop serving food or cooking food, and anything cooked after that time is cooked inside.
The reason I asked was because it says 10 o'clock, and I thought it was a bit earlier than that. But I stand to be corrected. I'm quite happy to be corrected if I'm wrong.
Anyone else? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Mr. Thackeray. Can I just refer you to the section we have on page 11 of 69, which is the highways and parking, which obviously is a particular concern to Mr. Stoker and others. We're told that the applicant has submitted car parking and traffic surveys, and we're told later down in the last paragraph on that page that there's a survey period. I wanted to know what that survey period was that you'd undertaken, and what sort of timescale that was. And the other thing as well, intriguingly, at the bottom of the page, it talks about the recorded peak occupancy in the car park was, and then that disappears over the page, really. But there isn't anything said over the page, so I don't know whether you have a figure on that. Oh, is that the, oh, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, so 26, I bet that's my fault. So in terms of the analysis you make on an establishment like this, because of the way people come and go, and I'm no expert on this, but that's the analysis that your survey showed, is it? It's never fully occupied and rarely would exceed 26.
It's never fully occupied, and if it appears fully occupied, it's as I explained, it's because the spaces aren't marked out and people are generous in their parking habits. The surveys, we did 2 surveys. Firstly, we asked the staff at the pub to undertake a survey and to simply go out over a period of a week and count the number of cars every 3 hours. The your officers suggested that that wasn't robust enough, and we took professional advice from highway consultants who undertook their own survey again over a period of a week, and that was the survey which was then submitted to Mr. Pocock, I think, to deal with the and which has led to the conclusion that you have before you.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Thackeray. Thank you for coming. I just would like to go to the first paragraph in on page 11 of 69 for members, and just ask about the outside cooking that's going to be taking place. Could you please enlighten us on what that's likely to be, and the frequency of that, please? Thank you.
Yes, again, you're not the first person to ask that question, and we have provided with the application a typical menu for the event. Basically, the pub's main food offer, if I can put it that way, is seafood. So it's lobsters, prawns, sort of thing, which are flash cooked. There's no barbecue. There's no deep fat frying outside. There's no burgers, sausages, fried foods. It is that obviously that can take place inside the kitchen as it does at the moment, but and such food will be brought out. But outside, it is mainly the fresh seafood, which is seared. I think is the I'm not a cooking expert myself, but I think that's the. I have Mr. Davis with me, who's the landlord, who is probably the man who could answer that question in far more technical terms, if it would help. But this has been raised with the. Yes, he said in his email to me, it'd be quick cooked shellfish, lobsters and prawns, no burgers, no sausages. In fact, nothing with enough fat to cause smoke or odour. And it's mainly that sort of market that they're looking for.
Further question?
Thank you, Chair. Just one supplementary. So
I'm sure I can leave you a menu.
Thank you, but I'm not allowed to accept a menu at this particular time. My supplementary question is so are you envisaging that this cooking area is going to be used daily? Is that correct?
Well, weather permitting, yes. I mean, it's a seasonal and weather related operation, as any garden would be. But yeah, I mean, if the weather allows and the customer's there, then people wishing to dine outside can do so. And if the meal that they choose is one that lends itself to the outside cooking facility, then yes, it could take place on a daily basis.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Thackeray. Questions. I didn't go on the. I was unable to make the visit, and I'm not familiar with the pub. But am I using the word pub incorrectly? It's a gastro pub. I see we're written that. Is it predominantly? I suppose the questions are food, and therefore this is an extension to food. Well, I've got a couple more, Chair, just to. But can I just take those one at a time?
Yes, do.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the previous owner, before I was aware of the property, I think the previous owner and operator was Marco Pierre White. So it was very much a food-led business. Cirrus Inns are, perhaps they forgive me for saying, not in the same league as Marco Pierre White, but they are very much a food-led operation. I would say it is a restaurant. I mean, if you go into the bar area, there are, I think, half a dozen stools around the bar, and the rest of it is dining area. So I would say it's very much dining oriented rather than a boozer.
So, which led me on really to the question. You said you hadn't got a garden at the moment. It's unusual to not have the garden. So my question was, if it was more a pub in that sense, it's the question of smoking. If what provision there is now, opening up and putting a garden is the traditional way of passing smokers into an area where they can smoke.
Yes, I mean, when I say it hasn't got a garden, there are benches at the front, which are included in the number of covers. There's this little yard at the back where the indoor dining area spills out into a rather unpleasant little area where I think where smokers tend to congregate rather than diners at the moment. We've not put a smoking shelter in or anything like that, so we're not directing smokers to a particular part of the garden. I think it will regulate itself. I think in the sense that if you're going there for a pleasant meal and but the people on the next table are lighting up, then you perhaps won't go there again.
Any more? Thank you very much, Mr. Thackeray. Councillor Faulkner. You have 4 minutes, Councillor, and I'll tell you when there's one to go.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm the Borough Councillor for Highclere, St Marybourne, Berkeley, along with John Isaac, who is the second. And also, I've been a Highclere Parish Councillor for 8 years. And I've been using the yew tree Inn on occasion, both eating and accommodation, for 32 years. Now, I will focus on points 3 and 4 of the reasons for the officer's recommendation for approval. Those 2 points to which I and the Parish Council object. Point 3 says that there will be no adverse impact on the highway. I would disagree. Throughout the documents, there is a reference to the unclassified road to Hollington and Zell Farms, also referred to as Bartlett's Down Lane, as if it were just a small access road. It is in fact the main route to the parish of Ashmansworth, to Fakenham, and to several access points on the walks of the Wayfarers Walk. Consequently, it is frequently used by residents, commercial and farm traffic, and visitors. It is steep and narrow, and the bend by the yew tree and Hollington Farm, which is just before the yew tree car park, is dangerously downhill and blind. Its junction with the A343 is notorious, and on several occasions Ashmansworth Parish Council has written to Highclere Parish Council requesting that we initiate safety measures such as reducing the speed limit from 60 to 30. And incidentally, we've always had problems with Hampshire and the police's figures on accidents on that stretch. The A343 is a heavily used route from Andover to the Newbury bypass. And because of the nature of the road, there is a tendency for large bunches of vehicles to converge on Highclere, often following large lorries from the Andover industrial estates. The proposal for the garden states that the facility will be used as an alternative only for diners. I would disagree. There is a demand for beer gardens, and this size garden will attract people from some distance in summer. The proposals for parking will be inadequate. The existing parking on the A343 is dangerous, as is stated in the highway report. And the entrance to the garden off of the A343 is high risk, as the unwary could walk straight out into traffic doing 60 miles per hour. Also, given the size of the garden with 80 seats and a serving hatch, and given the accommodation available, one could foresee it would become a wedding venue, in which case the traffic increase could be considerable. And if diners are forced to park on the A343 or the Bartlett's down lane, it will be dangerous.
1 minute.
Point 4 states that there will be no undue loss of privacy, etc. For Hollington Farm in particular and High Street, this is simply untrue. It is opposite their vehicle entrance and virtually opposite the pedestrian gate. And I fail to see how a 2-metre acoustic fence will make life tolerable. If this size of garden were to prove popular with families and weekends or wedding parties, then life would be simply intolerable. I ask, and the PC ask, that the committee refuses this application in its current form.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have any questions for councillor Faulkner from members? No? Well, thank you very much. Right, members, questions to officers? Do we have any? Councillor Mrs. Frankham.
Yes, I just wonder if somebody then could clear up, because Mr. Thackeray said that there'd be no food or drink after 9:30, but in the paperwork on page 4 of 69, it's saying at 2200, which is 10 o'clock. So I'm just wondering, you don't want to be saying yes to something and it's actually incorrect.
There's two different times. 9:30 is the time given to stop serving food, and then in the conditions on condition, that's in condition 12, then in condition 8, we're asking for a scheme of lighting that would have a timer to be switched off at 10:30. So if you got your food at 9:30, it gives you an hour to eat it, but there would be no more food allowed to be cooked or served in the garden, but you could sit in the garden and eat it, and after an hour the lighting would be on a timer and would go off. It would just be low level sort of safety, health and safety lighting.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to see what the officers say about the comments from Councillor Faulkner about parking.
The comments made by Councillor Faulkner regarding the A343. Right. That's an existing situation. It's something which has been asked to be controlled in the past, but the controls haven't been imposed. So the advice is we couldn't ask for those controls on that parking on the A343 now for this application.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. On that same theme, do the officers not recognise that there's going to be an increase for everything we've heard here? It appears to be an expansion of the business, that there will be increased trade coming to the U3N as a result of the implementation of this particular application, and yet you're saying there's no increase in parking and no more restrictions on the roads? I just want to get it clear.
As Mr. Thackeray said, the intention and by condition also is that the car parking spaces would be marked out, which they're not at the moment, to improve the efficiency of the car park. So there would be more cars actually parked in the car park than is generally sort of done presently on an ad hoc basis. Yes, there would be an increase in the number of customers, but as the figures they provided show, the customers are spread out over the sessions when the pub is open. They're not all there at the same time. And the figures are provided showing the number of covers at each session. They provide those figures over the 12-month period from August of last year to this year.
And your last comment means that that's existing covers.
They provided the figures for the covers over the last 12 months, August to August, and they provided an extrapolation of those figures to how that would increase with the extra number of covers they provide in the restaurant to predict what the maximum number of people would be, which is all the figures that are in the report. And so that, based on that expansion, there would be enough parking.
The concerns on the road?
The Council of Falkland says the parish council has disputed the county and police figures for accidents. I'm afraid those are the only figures that I have. For the last 10 years, there have been 5 accidents on that road. And none, from the reports given, they're none related to the road itself. They're more to do with driver error.
Councillor Tucker?
Thank you. I'm not quite sure who I direct my question to. It's with regard to the water and flooding. When we came out of the pathway into the lane there, on the other side of the road there was this drain coming out with water flowing. Now, we haven't had a lot of rain for quite some time, and there was real flowing water, which made me wonder what happens when there's a lot of water coming down, and yet nobody seems to be particularly worried about it.
The site is in a flood zone 1, which is an area where there's very, very low risk of flooding, a 0.1% chance, 1 in 1,000 is a way of extrapolating it. The council drainage officer hasn't got an objection with the application, and it seems that there was some localised flooding issues, which the applicant has, through the planning history, has installed new sewerage equipment and also a ditch, a swale, and a French land drain. So it looks like there has been work done. It's in a low flood risk, and our drainage officer has said he has no objections to the application. I mean, we could request permeable materials, or I don't know. No.
Sorry, this is on a different subject altogether. If the food to be served, cooked and served outside is being promoted as a non-smelly kind of food, i.e. the fish is seared or whatever it is, that's fine to some extent now. What if the place was sold and they were given permission to use a similar kind of thing there, but they didn't have fish, which is not so smelly? I think the local people might not be quite so happy, but we wouldn't have any kind of control over that. Is that right?
No, we wouldn't have control over menus or what was to be cooked if it was a different operator, no.
Councillor Mrs. Frankham?
Yes, I just want sort of clearing up for in my own mind. Where you were talking about there was 5 accidents in 10 years, I'm assuming that's 5 reported accidents where obviously emergency services has had to be called. It doesn't include where perhaps there was accidents where mum went home and sort of cleaned up the grazes or whatever. That's just sort of severe accidents.
Yes, Councillor. The figures recorded by the police and therefore and county council are injury-related accidents. So there have been 5 reported injury-related accidents. So where the emergency services were called.
Yes, please.
Sorry, if you're saying injury reported, is that injury that requires you to go to the hospital? I was involved in an accident and I didn't actually go to the hospital, so it wasn't recorded, but a few hours later I was in A&E. So I'm just wondering how it worked.
All the incidents were recorded by the police, so I'd say the police were in attendance. Whether they all involved injuries that went to hospital, I don't know. I think it's just some matter of course, as you know from car insurance policies, that if you're involved if somebody's injured at the scene of an accident, you report it to the police, and therefore that would be recorded.
Councillor Potter?
Just a question again, if I may, of the officer in regard to car parking issues and the like. I mean, looking at the 3rd paragraph down on 12 of 69, I mean, I think I accept the premise that if you formally mark out the car parking spaces, perhaps that will discipline people like myself a bit better than on an ad hoc basis. I'm not entirely certain, but I guess that could apply. But second sentence talks about likewise further measures to aid travel are suggested, such as car sharing and cycling. Car sharing could be more viable for pub customers due to the sale of alcohol. I mean, philosophically, I understand this, but I mean, is that really a meaningful statement? I mean, who is this in the control of except the customers? I don't see how anybody else can influence any of that, and presumably we can't influence it in planning terms, can we? I just wondered what the sentences relate to, really. I mean, it's a bit of a wish list, I understand that, but is that all it is, really?
Councillor, the comment was made in response to the suggestions made in the submission by the applicant, where they were talking about ways of trying to encourage customers to think about their methods of travel to the site. And as it goes on further in that same paragraph, says that it's more possible to influence and arrange the travel where it's affecting the staff rather than the customers.
I mean, that I understand, sorry, and clearly the employer can do what it wants in regard to its own employees, and that's all very commendable, but in regard to the customers, I mean, I guess, you know, we would all agree, wouldn't we, really? We can't control the habits of the customers using this establishment, can we? Nor can the applicant, I guess.
Councillor, I think that's what it says in that. This cannot be influenced by the pub. It's just something that would be down to the customers, but there's a possibility that they would car share.
Any more questions for officers? Councillor Taylor.
Just to the highways officer, there's just a slight concern is that we're looking at a reason for refusing because of highway safety. It appears to me that 5 accidents in 10 years that are reported is quite high. So it does seem to be a not terribly safe bit of road. And you're saying, oh, well, it was driver error. Well, nobody blames the road, do they, for accidents? I mean, it's always driver error, isn't it? But obviously, the road must have something to do with it. What's frustrating is that I'm sure we'd all rather see the highway made safer by having a sign or a restricted speed or whatever and encourage a flourishing business rather than refusing a flourishing business because highways refuse to do anything about a road that clearly isn't safe. What's the way around this? What's the order of things? How can we sort of get these things to tally?
I think it's the ultimate decision will be down to the county council officers, and they would base that on statistics. I'm afraid that the higher the number of accidents, the more likely action will be taken. Regards to your other point, I think yes, if the speed of the road was changed, that could have quite an influence. Sorry, the speed limit of the road.
But there's nothing we can do in this scenario because there's nobody to tell us that, you know, yes, we'll do that. That can be something that we'll do in order to make it safer. So we've really got no power to do anything about it here. We're sort of looking at refusing something because 5 accidents obviously isn't enough for highways to do anything. And we're not even looking at like a major thing, like a roundabout or something. You're talking about perhaps restricted speed or a sign or something. I mean, obviously you can't really answer this, but it is very frustrating that we can't do anything about that at this point of decision making.
I think, Chair, I mean, I do understand the point being raised, and I think, as Mr. Pocock says, it is a matter for county. I think the key thing for the committee is the application, and whether this application in itself generates the need for those sort of benefits, if you like, or improvements to the highway. But given the existing situation, I think the question would be: does the intended expansion, if you like, through this application merit anything that would then require off-site highways works? I don't think we would be in any way reasonable in trying to insist that it did. I think it's right that the committee raised the issues, but I don't think this application is a vehicle in which that could be achieved.
Any more questions? Councillor Bowd.
Just on this question of the highways, I mean, in no way are we in the report at all that any of those accidents have been anything to do with the pub being in that position. It's the junction that's the problem, not the pub.
Thank you for that. Do you agree with that?
Councillor, on that point, I've got the report here. I wouldn't like to read it out, but you're quite welcome to have a look at it if you wish. And I mean, it is quite brief in the way that the police report, and I wouldn't want to draw any particular conclusions, but I'd say that the accidents in the vicinity of the site, I wouldn't say anything there suggests that the junction is the cause of the problem. The description, as I said, looks more towards driver error.
Any more? Well, let us have a debate about this. Has anybody got any proposals to make or comments? Councillor Bound.
Yep. It's a difficult one. I mean, we can pontificate all we like, I think, about increases in business, which might mean increases in car traffic, which might, they're all mights. I mean, obviously, the applicant is hoping for a successful business, so presumably a successful business will require or might attract extra custom. But I can't see any reason to refuse the application based upon what I've heard tonight, because we're talking about what might happen in the future. Even the statistics, 5 accidents in 10 years. There might not be another accident for another next 100 years. 5 in 10, fine, that's 5 over that 10 years, but it doesn't necessarily extrapolate to another 5 accidents in the next 10 years and so on. So I can't see any reason to refuse the application.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I too agree with Councillor Bound's comments in the fact that whilst I'm very concerned about the road safety and the potential impact that this could have on the business, I just literally can't see any reason why this shouldn't be approved reluctantly, and as long as all the conditions are all adhered to with the acoustic fences, etc., I would like to make a motion that we approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I'm inclined to agree. I really do want to encourage this business. Most pubs in villages are adjacent to houses and have an outside area, but they don't normally even have the benefit of an acoustic barrier. And I would think it has to be a very balmy evening anyway to eat outside. So it's not going to be that often that there's going to be hordes of people eating outside. And the fact that the external lighting will be switched off at 10:30 gives some comfort that they're not going to hang around in the dark. And the other thing is, of course, that because it's a licensable activity, the selling of alcohol in this area, if they're really, normally when you give a decision in development control, that's the end of it if it's an approval. But if there really is a great deal of public nuisance caused by the licensable activity, then there can be a review called of the licence, which gives some extra comfort for the people who live really close by. So I think for that reason, I would be inclined also to approve and would second the motion.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tucker.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with the other members, but the one thing that slightly concerns me, I have nothing against the garden being used for eating and or drinking, but for the area to be used with a separate bar and servery, that really is expanding the business, I think, just that little bit too far, which I think in the end they will have more people than than the traffic, etc., can take, and so I don't think I could support it, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Potter.
I certainly agree with Councillor Taylor and Councillor Ban. I have to say, I mean, I went on the viewing. Subjectively, if I'm honest, I was quite shocked when we went to the area behind the pub and saw what we saw, because for a high quality pub, this was a bit of a surprise to me, putting it mildly, and to find the pub with no usable garden area in whatever form. So I'm very understanding of why the people who own the pub would want to do what they're going to do. And I am convinced, I think, having heard what's been said, that the extra trade can be catered for in regard to the parking arrangements. I mean, I've been somewhat facetious in regard to the discipline of people, but hopefully if it is set out better and people understand the need to park in a uniform way, I think it will accommodate the sort of trade that we're talking about. And it must be the case, I'm no expert on this, in terms of the way people come and go, the sort of peak traffic movement is unlikely at any particular time. And I mean, it is where it is in regard to this road junction and has been there for some long time. And as Councillor Taylor points out, there's nothing within this application that we can do to encourage the Highways Authority to do various things on that road to make it even safer than it is. That's outside of our brief. And in regard to the brief that we have in front of us, I would support the application that's before us.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a proposer and a seconder. Can we vote for approval, please? Those in favour? Carried. Officer, will you?
The application is approved as on the papers and the update.
Thank you. We move to the next item. Item number 2, Tesco Express in Oak Ridge Road, Basingstoke. And I have speakers Nick Stafford and Councillor Mrs. James and Councillor Harvey. But first of all, Officer will present. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of a single-storey side extension, alterations to shopfront and relocation of an ATM at the Tesco Express store in Oak Ridge Road in Basingstoke. It also incorporates the alterations to parking and erection of a new plant enclosure to the rear of the premises, and it's before the committee with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Nick Stafford, please. You have 4 minutes. I will give you a warning when there's one left.
Good evening, members, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening in support of this application. I am Nick Stafford from David Lock Associates, a chartered town planner and the agent on the application. It's worth stating at the outset that this is not a planning application on behalf of Tesco, who are the tenant for my client Brookton 2000 Limited, who own the site. This application was submitted following pre-application engagement with your planning officers to discuss the characteristics of the proposal and has been positively amended post-submission in response to potential concerns raised by planning and highways officers and also to address operational concerns raised by local ward members. It's clear from local ward members' comments and written representations received that the main concerns from neighbours relate to parking pressures and delivery and servicing arrangements, both of which are valid planning points to consider. It is set out within the specialist supporting technical information, which has been endorsed by the Council's highways officers, that applying the resulting trip rates will not result in additional undue parking pressures, and that the realignment and formalisation of the area in front of the store to provide 6 dedicated car parking spaces alongside new facilities for cycle parking is confirmed by highways officers to be appropriate to serve the extended store. In terms of delivery matters, it should also be noted that the applicant has supported the introduction of a condition, proposed condition 6 in this instance, to require the submission and approval of a delivery and servicing management plan for the onward operation of the premises. Such a plan would control the size of delivery vehicles and the frequency and timing of deliveries. The applicant acknowledges and agrees that even at its proposed extended size, there is no need for the store to be serviced by 18-wheeler HGVs, which are clearly not appropriate in this otherwise residential area. There would therefore be no resistance on my client's part to restricting this within a delivery and servicing management plan, something which the operator would need to abide by to avoid enforcement action. Members and neighbours should therefore be reassured that this robust pre-occupation planning condition would fully ensure appropriate protection for existing residents against disturbance and inconvenience caused by inappropriate deliveries and servicing. This planning application is wholly consistent and in accordance with national and local planning policies in providing a moderate increased retail offer to improve the function of this established local shopping facility. This will improve the facilities on offer to the benefit of the local community, as encouraged by emerging local planning policy CN6, a policy which supports suitable proposals which would improve local services, including, specifically, local convenience stores. The proposed development will also improve the customer experience in the store through the modernisation and improvement to the interior and enabling a limited number of additional goods to be displayed. This can be achieved at no risk of harming the vitality or viability of existing town centres or impacting upon the amenities enjoyed by neighbouring residents. The applicant has carefully considered comments from neighbours and local ward members and recognises that this application provides the opportunity to incorporate features to improve the site and how it operates. Accordingly, a number of specific features suggested by councillors Harvey and James have been incorporated into the final submitted plans presented to you today, which I trust you will agree are positive amendments to the initially submitted scheme in ensuring the store operates sensitively and appropriately within the immediate surrounding area, thus addressing several of the concerns of local residents. This has included improved fencing and security to the rear of the store, the white lining across nearby private accesses where appropriate to make it clear there should be no parking in such areas, and the addition of new lighting on the side of the building adjacent to the public realm, lighting the path through the green space at this location. It will have been noted that the recommendation this evening is to resolve the grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure an appropriate highways improvement contribution. The necessary unilateral undertaking has been completed and signed ahead of this meeting, meaning the required mechanism to deliver this payment is in place. It's therefore considered that the planning arguments in favour of the scheme are compelling. As such, members are respectfully requested to endorse your planning officer's detailed and considered recommendation and resolve to grant planning permission this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stafford. Do I have any questions from members for Mr. Stafford? Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Stafford. You said there was 6 dedicated parking spaces at the front of the shop. How many of these are for disabled parking? And secondly, you currently have an ATM machine there, which attracts quite a lot of trade. People go in there to get cash out without necessarily using the actual store.
I can confirm that, as shown on the proposed plans, one of the spaces is designated and marked out for disabled use and meets all the regulation requirements. In terms of the ATM, we don't have any statistics about how many people use that specifically. It's obviously an additional feature to the store. It will be used in the majority of cases, I'm sure, through link trips, but I'm afraid I don't have any statistics to say how many people arrive just to use that.
Any more questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Now, Councillor, sorry? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a bit concerned. I know hopefully you can, along with potentially officers, allay my concerns about noise. This is a plant room that you're looking to actually put on the back of the store, and I'm just concerned about what's going to be done acoustically to reduce the noise in respect of the neighbours.
There is existing plant and servicing to the rear of the store. It is relocated as a part of the proposals. It will be appropriately screened. It'd have to meet various building regs, regulations, etc. I've just scanned the conditions. I don't think there's any specific condition relating to any specific type of acoustic enclosure or anything like that. I do know from experience that such a condition is not necessarily uncommon, and if members or officers decided it was appropriate, then my client would have no issue in accepting such a condition.
Any more? Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Now, Councillor James and Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, we in terms of that particular answer, we were informed that the plant equipment will be quieter as a replacement to what currently exists, which is an important point. First of all, this application is coming forward from the landlord. It's not coming forward from Tesco's. And that's an important point to bear in mind in terms of what has been proposed, because the pre-app to this, I have to say, has been very good and very positive. Their engagement with us as ward members and with the community, we have no criticism of whatsoever and totally support, actually. We've canvassed the residents twice. We canvassed them in May. We canvassed them a couple of weekends ago on the application. So they've had a chance to look at what was originally proposed and some of the changes that have come through since then. Some of the issues that have been raised do relate to the parking and do relate to the way that the store is operated. But I have to say that the concerns about the volume of traffic, it's a successful store. it's going to get a significant amount of traffic. And yes, there are not enough car parking spaces for the size of store, but the problem they face is the constraint of where they can actually add extra parking in the first place. So it's quite a difficult balance, this one. And it's been there for many years. There has been a store in this location for many, many years. So it's an important balance that's being struck, which is why the issues we raised in relation to parking were important, because they agreed to white line the driveways of local residents to prevent parking over them by shoppers. They agreed to help and secure the issues with Stratfield Road as well as Oakridge Road. So that was positive, and neighbours recognised that. In terms of the security of the rear of the store, that's positively addressed by the application, and we welcome that as to what currently exists, as to what we're likely to see being provided. The move of the ATM, there is no particular issue with the move of the ATM from one side to the other that's been raised with us. And we also welcome the lighting down the side of the store that will overlook the open space and see that as quite an improvement on what currently exists. In terms of the operation condition, condition number 6, that relates to the deliveries, the HGVs, the times of the store, we'd like to see an informative on the application, if committee would be willing to support us, but in drawing that up, the applicant is encouraged to work with us and the residents to get the right times and to get the right size of vehicle. They've done a good job so far, and we see no reason why that can't carry on to secure what's going to be beneficial to our community, particularly on the size of vehicle. The amount of times the curbstones have been replaced in Stratfield Road, because the lorry drivers cannot reverse to save their life round the corner at all. And the amount of times the verge is ripped to pieces is significant, and we want to see smaller HGVs service a store of this size. Now, Tesco's are a problem in that regard. Who knows who the operator may be in the future? We would want to see that addressed. In regard to the condition, it also relates to the times of those deliveries. We have had issue in where delivery vehicles have parked up and rolled their shopping cages down the road because they're stacked. They arrive stacked. And that is a road safety issue that we want to see addressed. It isn't a matter for committee today, but it is a matter that needs to be addressed through the operations conditions. So we'd like an informative, please, if you were willing to support us in that. We also want to see an informative in terms of the way the operation of the store might go forward, and discussing the actual user of the store. There are issues of shoplifting, and we've seen that Tesco's have started to put their alcohol at the front of the store now, and they've removed the security from the store. So shoplifting is taking place by people running in the store, grabbing and running out, whereas before we had a security guard, they had the licensing organised, it was all dealt with. That isn't a matter for you, but as an informative, you can help us working with the landlord in achieving what we would like to see, which is the right operation of the store going forward, particularly when the franchise is reconsidered, and that's important for us. As I say, we've consulted the community. There is support for the store. There are issues to do with parking that we'd like to see support as well, and informative to help us with the white lines. Discuss that with officers. They're very supportive of that. As I say, an informative on the condition, and if you can help us in regard to the operation of the store in the future, that would be very good. But we are in support of the application, and we would like to see it approved.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for Councillor Harvey? Councillor Tucker.
Yes. Can you tell me, have you given the officers exactly what you would like as an informative?
The officers have got the condition 6 as is written in the report, and we wouldn't want to see that amended. It is a proper written condition 6 as far as the operations is concerned. What we'd like is the ability to work with officers and the landlord to get the timings right and to get the deliveries right. And we'd also need that to be then enforced against who then took the franchise on. The difficulty is we've got the landlord that will do the extension and do the store change. They'll then put it out for franchise. So it's whoever's going to take on the franchise that will also need to be part of that negotiation and conversation. And that's why it's not necessarily something we can settle this evening. But if you can help us with an informative as ward members, we think we can take it on and do the job we need to do for our residents.
Any more questions? Councillor Hood.
Thanks, Chair. As you know, there's a very substantial hedge there. I feel we need to condition that as well, and someone needs to be responsible. We can't leave it to the lady next door. And I think, therefore, it's important that we agree anything tonight that Tesco's or the landlords take over the responsibility of keeping that hedge at a reasonable height and shape.
Just looking at that photo, the proposal would see the hedge reduced from the Tesco side to a certain extent in order that the extension, I think if you look at the plans, can be seen from that side. There isn't an issue in terms of the consultation that we've had on it, but totally agree with Councillor Hood. You know, the maintenance of it does need to be accepted as something that the franchisee will be responsible for.
Any more? Thank you to Councillor Harvey. Does Councillor Mrs. James wish to speak? Yes, questions to officers? Do we have any? Yes, Councillor Miller, you were first away, I think.
Question to officers: can you actually do what Councillor Harvey suggested? Because it seems to me, I've been on this committee for a number of years, that's a bit outside the remit of DC. I'd like to be educated.
Mike.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you're right, and I think that's where the difference between informative and condition comes in. I think the purpose of an informative note on a decision notice can be to inform what details the local authority may expect, for example, in relation to the discharge of a condition. So on the previous agenda item, there was that information about acoustic barriers. This time it could be, it's not enforceable, just to be clear, it's an advisory note. It could be an advisory note to say, the applicant is attention is drawn to the committee's views around further consultation with local ward members in drawing up details for condition 6, for example. I think the three areas that could be caught by informatives would be drawing up of condition 6 and advisory note that there's further consultation with local ward members, drawing the applicant's attention to the desire for the white lines to be imposed. I don't think it's something that we can impose through this planning application, because again, it relies on highways to do it. But there have been some, at least in principle, discussions with our traffic team in terms of whether it could be done, and in principle they believe it could, so there's no reason not to include it as an advisory note. And also in terms of the security and management of the store, it's just really drawing the applicant's attention to issues. Another example, on other applications, it may be that a statutory consultee says something, well, yeah, we're advising of something beyond the planning application, but just so, Mr. Applicant, you're aware, here's an advisory note that goes on the decision notice as well. So that's the base of the informatives. I would say in relation to the issue around the hedge, a condition could be included, because that I think is pertinent to the planning application regarding the sort of final boundary treatment on that position. So I think that could be an additional condition to secure final details of boundary treatment.
Councillor Tucker, followed by Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Potter.
I think we were all asking the same question.
Right.
It's just been answered, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Potter.
I mean, if I understood Mike correctly, who's summarised a great deal. I mean, we are pushing against an open door, I think, here, aren't we? And the agent, I think, was very supportive and compliant in terms of the way they wanted to approach this. And it may be similar to what we've done elsewhere. I remember in terms of, the Lily side, if we could get the good officers of the chair to oversee this as well already, we get to a mutual arrangement, which I think is going to lead to the outcome everybody's looking for. I mean, on the hedge thing, it does seem to me specific. That has to be changed to allow this extension. It follows, therefore, that, some condition and regulation about the size and regular maintenance of that hedge can be included as a reasonable condition within this approval.
Just to clarify, absolutely right on the condition. That's something that we could impose and control effectively. I think just to clarify in terms of the purpose of the informative note on this application, given the scale of development, would be the process would be that it would be an informative note on the decision notice. So the decision would go out if committee were minded to approve, and it would really be an advisory note to the applicant, which is slightly different to the Eli Lilly site, which was more a resolution issue about going through a particular process before the application was approved. But certainly it would be there as a kind of a note on the decision notice.
Any more questions, or do we want to go straight to debate? Any proposals? Councillor Tucker.
Sorry, do you want me to say it a bit noisier? I move the recommendation.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second the recommendation, but also include the advisories and also the condition about the hedge. Thank you.
Councillor Hood.
As a ward councillor, I would like to say a couple of things. I've been excluded from all the discussions quite rightly because I'm a member of DC. I think that what my colleagues have suggested tonight is a way forward. It's very refreshing to hear the fact that ward members, officers, and the applicant can try and work together so they get a scheme which is acceptable before it comes even to our committee. I think it's fair to say that Tesco's is vital to the area. It's been there a long time, very highly used. But having said that, it's also fair to say that over the years we have had issues, especially the highways, which as we spoke about with HGVs, antisocial behaviour, drinking, etc. But during most of that time has been resolved. I think that what's important tonight is the fact that we can agree certain things and hopefully allow it to go ahead, which we proposed. At the same time, leave the door open, in a sense, for any further discussion between the officers and the ward members and the applicant. I think that what we've achieved so far is, I think, good practice, best practice, I think. And therefore, I'll be quite happy to support what's been suggested by my two colleagues for approval and seconded.
Thank you, Councillor, and I apologise for not asking you earlier as the ward member. I have a proposal, Councillor Frank.
I just better declare that I'm the county councillor. It's in my division as the county councillor, and I wasn't included in the talks for the. So I've come with a completely clear mind to this.
Excellent. We have a proposer and a seconder for approval. Those in favour of it? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. So that application is approved as per the order paper, but that would be subject to the legal agreement. I understand there are a couple of issues with the legal agreement which still remain outstanding, which we will continue to work with the applicant to resolve. But the recommendation before you is to grant it subject to the legal agreement, and that remains to be the case. Obviously, this will include the informative notes that we discussed earlier. With regard to the operation of the store, with regard to the white lines in front of for the parking, and with regard to the consulting with ward members with regard to the specifics of condition 6 with regard to the timing and size of vehicles to be used. And also with regard, we would also include an extra condition which would require the protection of the hedge during the construction phase and its maintenance thereafter.
Everyone happy with that? Good, great, thank you. We move on then to item number 3, Rowan Lodge, Crown Lane, Newnham. And I have got Susan Turner, the parish clerk, and Chris Green, both to speak, and Trevor Campbell-Smith to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a change of use of land to provide 14 new car parking spaces at the Rowan Lodge in Crown Lane, Newnham. It's a part retrospective. As members will remember, they visited the site on the viewing panel, and a section of the land is hard surfaced at the moment and cars are parked on there. It's before committee with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you for that. Susan Turner. No, it's not Susan Turner.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Richard Wilson. I am a resident and also a member of the Parish Council of Newnham and Netley Skers and Waterend.
Excellent. Well, you have 4 minutes and I'll give you 1 minute's warning at the end.
Thank you. We would like to suggest that these two applications should be considered together. We accept that despite the applicant's written and verbal promises that their original plan had more than ample parking, that the home needs extra parking, but believe that this should be within their own curtilage and not to the detriment of the conservation area and residents' enjoyment of the local countryside. We believe that the Planning Department and Landscape Officer have decided to approve option 1, as this does not involve the taking down of an old oak tree, even though some 17 residents and the Conservation Officer objected. The planning officer states that that option 1 preserves the character of the conservation area and that the proposed development preserves the landscape character and scenic quality of the area, but is of mind to refuse option 2 as the development would have a detrimental impact to the site and the rural landscape as it would fail to preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area. We feel these contradict each other. We'd like to emphasise that the conversion of a greenfield, i.e. option 1, with important vistas from the village green would mean building a car park on a location that is the epicentre of our community and would be more detrimental to the conservation area, especially as it is a totally unnecessary proposition. A car park in this location can be widely seen from the roads through the village and impacts on the views from Newnham Green, which is the heart of the community and the heart of Newnham Conservation Area. We, as the residents of Newnham and the Parish Council, would like both of these applications to be refused as there is a third option with limited impact to the views of the conservation area. We have demonstrated that the applicant could easily park all of their proposed needed 14 spaces within their own curtilage without removing the important oak tree. In fact, at a push, we have found that there is some extra 20 spaces. Also, it should be noted that they are currently not parking correctly within their boundary, thus wasting some 5 spaces. The amenity area at the front and to the side of Rowan Lodge are rarely used by the residents and staff, and they have a large terrace at the back of the home with elevated views. These new spaces would be shielded from the green by current hedgerows along the track and also the topography of the area. Extra lighting would not be required due to the home's current illuminations. Given the applicant's expansionary planning history on this site, which we have shared in a briefing document with Mr. Campbell-Smith, it is more than reasonable to assume that once they have permission for a car park which becomes effectively a brownfield site, they may seek to add additional service buildings and a car parking and increase the capacity of the retirement home even further. Newnham can't really cope with this. It is perfectly reasonable for residents to ask why, given their history, Rowan Lodge should protect the visual appeal of their property by siting additional parking outside the curtilage on a green field in the heart of the village. Fairness and reason suggest that as it was Rowan Lodge who broke their original commitment to the village about car parking, staff transport and planning commitments, they should find a way to protect the village within their own boundaries. We believe it is only a matter of time before they try and get change of use on the currently unused staff accommodation, thus requiring further parking again. Many thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Just to make clear, we can't take both together, we have to do them separately. Have I any questions for Mr. Wilson? Right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Chris Green now, please. You will have 4 minutes and I'll give you notice of the final minute. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Green and I'm the agent for the applicant. As you've heard, there's obviously 2 applications before the committee this evening suggesting alternative approaches to the provision of additional car parking at the Rowan Lodge care home. When Forest Care designed Rowan Lodge, they drew upon their experience gained elsewhere, including their experience in relation to the demand for car parking spaces, and it was felt that 26 spaces would be sufficient. They took account of factors such as the number of visitors they might expect at any one time, the anticipated travel patterns of staff, the general location of the site, and the availability of public transport. This level of provision was below the council standards at the time, which would at that time set maximum standards. The council's policy was designed to avoid over-provision of car parking spaces. The Highway Authority agreed at that time that the level of parking was acceptable and the permission was granted in 2007. Rowan Lodge opened in 2011 and unfortunately it soon became apparent that there weren't enough spaces. A number of reasons for this really. Firstly, the calculation of demand was based on estimates before the home opened. And whilst these are as accurate as possible, Rowan Lodge unexpectedly attracts a higher number of visitors than Forest Care's other facilities. Secondly, it was originally anticipated that the staff would be migrant workers, would have accommodation on site, and that was part of the application. Changes in the employment market and relevant legislation, however, in the last 5 years have meant that this was not the case when Rowan Lodge opened. Staff come from a catchment including Basingstoke, Hook, Fleet, Reading, Hartney-Whitney, Farnborough and Alton. These factors have had a significant and unexpected effect on the demand for car parking, and Forest Care has tried to manage this demand as best it can, and using the land opposite seemed the most sensible approach. Whilst not ideal, it remains necessary to tackle the issue and to find a suitable solution, as the roads surrounding Rowan Lodge are generally small rural lanes, and it would be unsafe to force staff and visitors to park along these. Parking on the surrounding roads would not only be dangerous, but it would also cause a greater disturbance and inconvenience for local residents. The first application proposes the continued use of land opposite Rowan Lodge. The form and layout minimises the land take and avoids the loss of mature trees and landscaping, and the current layout would be altered to provide a longer but narrower area of land. The existing hedgerow along the boundary would be improved, and there would be a second native hedgerow around the boundary of the parking area. There would also be new oak trees planted, and this additional landscaping will substantially screen any views of parked cars and improve the overall landscaping around the site. Overall, Forest Care believes this offers the best solution, and we welcome the officer's recommendation for approval. Although it uses a small area of open land, it would have a minimal impact. There are no objections from the council's landscape officer, none from the tree officer, the conservation officer, biodiversity officer, or the highway authority. While other solutions have been explored, these would have greater impacts upon the countryside. In conclusion, the need for additional parking spaces is obviously unfortunate, but it is critical that Forest Care tackles these issues. The consequences of failing to meet the demand would be significant and would create serious problems. It's considered that the proposal offers a sensitive solution, and although it involves the use of a field, it would have a minimal impact, and additional planting would be provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Green? Councillor Tucker.
Mr. Green, forgive me, but I may have missed something. The actual site that is being reused at the moment for parking, is that exactly the same as it was, or is this are you actually asking for an enlarged size?
It's a different shape. It's essentially longer and narrower, so it hugs more closely the access road, so that the incursion onto the countryside is less. So the shape of it has varied. In terms of the area, it's roughly the same. So the shape is altered, but the quantity is effectively the same.
So therefore, it would actually accommodate the same number of cars that are there at the moment, because when we were there on site, there were 14 there at that point.
That's correct. It would accommodate 14 additional cars, yes.
Councillor Potter.
Just being careful in the way that I asked this, really, if I may, but I went on the viewing, and simply I think all I'd ask you to agree or disagree with me on is that looking at the area which we did both front and rear and side, I mean, would you accept there are other areas within the curtilage of this establishment that could, with work, be changed into car parking spaces within the curtilage of the property?
Obviously, there is a second application before your committee that you'll obviously come on to consider in due course.
Beyond?
I've looked specifically at the spaces which the parish council has put forwards, and in practical terms, they unfortunately don't work. For example, 2 of them are on the access road immediately adjacent to the substation. If you actually look at the levels on the trees there and the root protection that would be needed, it wouldn't be possible to construct a parking space because of the levels. Equally, within the site, the other space proposed by the cycle parking, there's a gas main in that area and BT services within that area. The other spaces on the land to the south, we've obviously proposed within the second area. We have, I think, 4 parking spaces in that vicinity. But the scope to use more land in that area is actually very limited. There's a large retaining wall along that boundary near the building, which has at least a meter's drop. There are other considerable level differences. So whilst it's very easy to draw boxes on a plan, when you actually look at them and you look at what's usable and you add the turning spaces and the access space needed to actually get in and out of those spaces based on the highway's requirements, they aren't, unfortunately, practical solutions. And we have explored them, but unfortunately they don't work when the constraints are taken into account.
Any more questions? Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Green. Yeah, we unfortunately suffer from not having very large plans in front of us. So I'm referring to your landscape plan, which I can't really read, but the screening that you propose for the car park, I can't read the legend, and it shows like 4 circles. Is that 4 individual trees, or is it? Yeah, there we are up there. Are we talking a sort of tree line in general terms, or specifically specimen trees?
Thank you. There's apologies. Obviously, the scale is difficult to read when printed out like that. But there's a native hedge planted around the whole extent of the perimeter of the car park. That's the first element. The existing hedge along the access road would also be bolstered with some additional planting just to thicken that up. That would predominantly be sort of hawthorns and quite a dense area of low-level screening. To answer your question directly, the trees proposed there, I believe, are oak trees, obviously shown at that scale when they would originally be planted, but in due course would clearly grow to provide quite substantial screening, really. Thank you.
Councillor Frost, followed by Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the reason for the request for the car parking has come about through staff effectively using their own cars. I'm a bit concerned about the 24-hour use of this car park. Can you shed any light on whether this car park will be used 24 hours, or is it just a question of it being used during the day when the daytime staff are there intermingling with visitors?
Thank you. The shift patterns are effectively there are 3 shift times: 8 a.m. in the morning, 2 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock in the evening. So the nighttime shift is effectively 8 from the evening until 8 in the morning. There's no changes in shift pattern during the night. So I wouldn't expect any activity at all during that nighttime period, with the exception of emergency vehicles, etc., or what anticipated events like that. There is, at the officer's suggestion as well, a condition in terms of the use of that. There would be obviously no lighting in that area, and suggested that overflow area, as it were, wouldn't be used between the hours of, I think it's 9 o'clock at night and 7:30 in the morning. So we understand that concern and quite happy to accept that condition.
Councillor Tucker, followed by Councillor Bound.
Sorry, to come back to the trees and the boundary bit. It says in our report, and you've mentioned native trees. Can I, when it comes to the actual hedge that goes around, could we make sure that your suggestion is not that we have little oak trees like there is on the entrance at the moment, because they're so thin and spindly they'll never make anything. And I would hate to feel that we were looking for something that was going to make a real boundary, and that wouldn't.
Obviously, there is a condition requiring the sort of full details and the specification, and I would include you would have densities and tree species within that condition, I would expect. Obviously, the planting along the existing access will, in due course, thicken up. Our landscaping consultant has looked at that. That will be bolstered in any event as part of this proposal, but nature of the time, the native species sometimes take longer to grow than the non-natives, so it's a bit of a sort of balance between the ecological benefits of providing native species with faster growing species. So, thank you.
All right. Any more? Yeah. Councillor Bound.
Yeah, back to these trees again, I'm afraid. Well, one thing, what is the car park surface going to be? And second is, the roots of the tree, will they not eventually intrude into the car park? If it's anything like my lawn, it's got oak tree roots all over it, and it's a perishing nuisance. Will that not affect the parking?
I will say at the outset that I'm personally not a specialist on trees. I'm not a landscaping consultant, but they have been, the landscaping plan has been prepared by a specialist landscape architect. The surface itself would be of an informal nature with gravel rather than a sort of hard tarmac surface, so specifically intended to be in keeping. Typically where the area is in use, and that there is parking and movement on top of that, by their nature the roots grow elsewhere, because it's not, it's different to where you suddenly introduce parking in an area where the roots are already established. If you're planting them at the same time that the parking is provided, the trees grow in those conditions, and are able to adapt to that, and their roots will grow accordingly.
Any more? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing that did come up to me whilst you were answering Councillor Tucker's question, and also other questions about screening. One comment you did say was that obviously the native screening does take a lot longer to actually develop than potentially non-native species, etc. What is your client going to do in the short term to ensure that cars can't be seen from the green, so therefore not interrupting the beautiful vista that's already there?
And as I say, the details of that will be dealt with by a condition. And if it's something that you feel strongly about, then there could be opportunities for just a low-level fencing or of something of that nature to provide a more solid screen that could be bolstered with a hedge around it. So there would be options there if that was something that the committee felt appropriate, and we'd obviously be happy to work when discharging that conditions to find something that was acceptable and dealt with those issues, really.
Councillor Hood, Potter, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, I wonder if I could just check. I don't know whether my maths is right, really, but I mean, the provision that we're looking at now is to change the shape of the car parking area, isn't it? Obviously, from
correct
what it is currently, which is described as, is it 15 by 22 meters, which I work out to be 330 square meters, to 50 by 15, which is 750 square meters. So it's over double the area. Would that be right?
Sorry, I haven't got the figures in front of me, so
that's what I think our report includes. And I just wonder, I mean, in terms of everything we're talking about, there's no indication, obviously, that the number of car parking spaces per se needs to be increased. Really, why do we need to be looking at something which is over twice the area for the same number of cars?
The layout is derived, obviously, because you need access to those spaces. And it's a much more efficient way of laying out the land so that it's closer to the existing boundary rather than extending further, allows the screening to be closer to the building, closer to the existing screening as well. So the visual impact of that parking area is much more effectively managed. In terms of the number of spaces that are proposed, obviously I haven't gone into this in detail, but our
Am I missing something here? I mean, the 15 metres, which is the constant, is the depth of the area, isn't it? I mean, what's being extended is the length of it, isn't it? I mean,
No,
is that not right or not?
it comes in, I don't know if we've got an overlay plan, but at the moment there's a double row of parking spaces with an access through the middle. What we're proposing is a single row of parking spaces with the access. So it doesn't extend as far into the field. It, as I say, it hugs the area more closely, the access road.
We can clarify that.
Oh, it's only clarification, Chair. I mean, the one constant is 15 metres in both of the.
Yeah.
So I took that to be what I describe as the depth of the car park.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me the length had increased from 22 to 50. I mean, if I'm misunderstanding that, I'll be told, of course.
We'll get officers. We'll clarify that for us.
And could I just, while I've got the mic, I mean, could I just clarify? I mean, when we visited the site, there were, in fact, I think 14 or 15 vehicles parked there opposite each other, seemed to be perfectly adequately parked. But anyway, thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Bound, yes, sorry.
Yeah, it really sort of goes around Councillor Potter's point. Maybe I can help the applicant here, because when I observed those cars in that car park, I was wondering actually, because they were parked one on one side and one on the other, there must be is there a great deal of difficulty in getting those cars in and out at times?
Obviously the area wasn't originally intended for car parking and it wasn't designed as such. And it doesn't have the screening that would be provided, etc. But what we're trying to do is to provide something that will physically work rather than people double parking, and allow people to sort of move in and out of those spaces much more easily. It's a more efficient use of that area, really.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Questions to members, questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I think the one that's really, just raised its ugly head is an answer to Councillor Potter's question on the actual size, which is right.
Before I answer your question, Councillor Frost, if I could just make it absolutely clear, something that was mentioned during the course of Mr. Green's presentation earlier, there is actually an objection to this proposal from the Conservation Officer. He stated during the thing that there wasn't, but there is in fact, and that's reflected in the report. So I just wanted to make that clear at the outset. With regard to the size of the car park, currently it is irregularly shaped. As you can see on the plan, which I've kind of tried to rather clumsily highlight with my biro there, it is, as I say, an irregular shape, and the plan is to kind of even it out and make it, as is suggested, longer. It does end up slightly narrower than the maximum width that is shown on that. So yes, there is, I suspect there will be a fairly significant increase in space in terms of the overall area, but it is a more efficient layout in terms of the ease of manoeuvring vehicles around it and things like that.
Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair, just going back to that, if we could look at the block plan or the site plan with the blue and red, well, both black, but that's it. Now, in that bottom right-hand corner of the red section, looks like that shape that you showed us just now as the existing car park. On our plan, it's dotted. So, and then if that other piece of the red area above it is to be car park, then either I'm a Dutchman or whatever, but that looks double the size. So it seems quite clear that we could get twice as many cars in there now, based on what was there before.
That area will also include the landscaping area as well. So that includes the area of the landscaping. So not all of that will be entirely car park.
Councillor Miller?
I've got a feeling the committee is absolutely confused over exactly where we're going with this car parking space. What are the dimensions of the existing car parking space and the dimensions of the new one? And what is the intention? To increase the car parking space or make it more efficient? We keep hearing these two references being made. Can we have it just simple, crystal clear, please?
We're just checking that and we'll come back to it in a moment. Are there any other questions? No, it's okay.
Chair, if I can assist whilst officers are checking the size issue. I mean, I think the way to, or my understanding of the plans is that the irregular shape, if you like, that was shown on the survey plans, so the bit where you've got effectively the bit jutting out. As I understand it, that's not the sort of final boundary. It's the slightly shallower part, which would then extend all the way across. I think the intention of the planning application is so that effectively it's still the same number of car parking spaces overall, albeit that it is, just from an assessment of that plan, a much larger area, partly informed by the fact that there would be a more formal layout of those. So it would be, 14 spaces laid out in a particular way with the ability to sort of reverse out and pull away. My understanding of the existing situation on site is that it's a more ad hoc kind of approach. So you've got that more, well, looking at the plans in terms of the survey plan, that almost square area at the moment. So I think it does become slightly shallower. So we're just checking the sizes now. But the overall intention, as I understand it, is that it will still be 14 spaces. That could form part of a planning condition if there was an intention to restrict the number of parking spaces proposed through this application.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? It's the statements at the bottom of page 30 of 69. The proposed new parking will replace the constructor's compound area that's being used presently. The total number of spaces provided in association with the site. Now, is that the whole site of Rowans? I don't know. Or this site that we're examining today will be 40. And everybody else has been talking about 14. Or have I misheard it?
The number of 40 refers to the site as a whole. So it includes the existing parking that's provided on the other side of the accessway.
Thank you.
Again, if I can assist, the plan before you on the screen is obviously a more detailed plan directly from the planning application itself, which effectively shows those parking spaces laid out across the sort of top boundaries you're looking at the plan there. So it's the number of spaces marked up by the hatched area, if you like, allowing for manoeuvring out or reversing out of each space and then turning and going off, different to the existing situation where you have a more condensed ad hoc kind of approach to parking.
Is that clearer now? Right. Okay, any more questions, members? Let us go into debate then. Councillor Bound.
Just going back to what I was talking about with the agent. I mean, my observation on the viewing panel was that parking must have been very difficult for the people who were involved with the parking in terms of getting in and out, because in actual fact the depth of that car park is much the same, and if cars parked one on this near side and one on the far side, there would be little manoeuvring room for them to squeeze themselves in and out. So I can understand that parking arrangement there, as shown on this plan, which would have been very useful to have had in the first place, actually, would have solved a lot of problems, is a more efficient use of land, I suppose, in terms of the parking.
Councillor Frost. So you're just pointing. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification perhaps then of this. It still looks excessive, if I am understanding that plan right, that the access road is sort of underneath the trees that we see along the bottom, and we've got like a car's length to reverse back into an access road. I mean, if we built our car parks like that in town, we'd have half the number.
Any more comments?
The standard depth for reversing a vehicle out of a space, as I understand it, is six meters, which would be accommodated on that plan.
Councillor Potter.
I'm sorry, I know you're into debate, Chair. I just want to be absolutely clear. I know we were asked to note the fact that the conservation officer had raised an objection, but reading his or her comments in the substantive form, I mean, they are qualified, aren't they? I'm right in saying that he or she concludes that, given, in this instance, given the siting of the land, the visual connection with the existing care home, and there's no demonstrable harm on the landscape character or visual amenity of the area, the refusal of the application could not be justified in this instance. So it starts with that objection, but is qualified in that way in these special circumstances. Could I just check that's the way I should read that commentary?
That section of the report is actually part of the officer's evaluation of the conservation officers. His comments are not produced in full in the report. I would hope so.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I'm really struggling with the fact that at the moment they have a car park which encompasses 14 cars, which is effectively half of what they've currently got, and yet by laying everything all out, it's supposed to make it more efficient. But I'm really just struggling to understand the use of the land as it is now, and the use of the land that it's actually going to be, and why, if they're currently having, in the current first half, they're having a car along the hedge and then a little gap and a car along the top, surely by making everything hug the hedge, you would have a smaller gap. I'm just struggling to see the logic here, and I wonder if officers could enlighten me.
With regard to the existing use of the site, I suppose the piece of land is a former construction compound in association with the building of the care home. It should have been returned to its former condition once the construction phase was completed. So that is why the application is part retrospective at the moment, because that has not taken place. They are now parking vehicles on it. Hence the part retrospective part of the application. The application is therefore to provide a properly designed parking scheme that accommodates 14 vehicles, that incorporates the expansion into a further part of additional countryside, mitigated by some landscaping. It may have been possible to arrange the car park in a different way, but this is the scheme we had before us that didn't raise any highway objections in terms of its layout or any problems in that regard, and it was considered by officers that it was the harm that was caused by the scheme was not a sufficient detriment in landscape terms to have us recommend refusal of it. That is the situation that we're in. We've determined the application that we have before us. It may have been that there may have been more elegant proposals put before us, maybe, with regard to this, but as we didn't have a highway objection with regard to this, as we didn't see a safety or an amenity concern in that regard, it was not considered to be necessary to pursue that.
Anyone?
Thank you, Chairman. Members are obviously struggling with this, and so I'll come forward and I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Barnes.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify with members, would they want to see the additional condition that was discussed earlier on in debate with regard to species and size of planting and all the rest of it in the landscaping element? So an additional condition to secure those details perhaps a little more firmly so that they can be controlled at that stage. In that case, we'll add that in as well.
Thank you.
We can indeed include the details of offence within that condition if that's so required.
Now we move to item 4, which we have to take again, and we've got the same public speakers. They may or may not wish to come forward again. No. Green. It'll be, wait a minute, it'll be presented by officers first. Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. This is another application for Rowan Lodge in Newnham. This application is for the use of ancillary landscaped area to provide 14 in number new car parking spaces with spaces to serve the care home. This application is before committee with a recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Wilson, you come forward now, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Through discussions with Trevor over this and the two applications, it was always deemed that it would be a either or. So being that you have passed the first, can I have clarification back, or can we all have clarification back from Trevor that this would obviously carry on as a rejection without any argument from the applicant?
If the members, I'm sure, are clear to make whichever decision they choose to make with regard to it. If members wanted to recommend approval, to approve this application, we could impose a condition which would be a sort of if you do A, you can't do B kind of condition to ensure that we didn't end up with both schemes being constructed on the site and a number of 28 spaces being provided, which wasn't intended.
That's basically 28 would be totally overkill for sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. All right. Mr. Green. That was Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can make life a little bit easier for everyone. In the light of your approval of the previous application, for which we're grateful, we would withdraw the current application. It's not the applicant's intention to implement both schemes. So I think that's makes our position clear, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. So we can move on. Thank you very much indeed. Right, members, we go to the next item, which is item 5. Albright International Limited, Ard Glen Road, Whitchurch. And I have Mr. Henderson's not making it, but I have Maria Adaway and Kevin Holland to speak on this, and it's going to be introduced by Trevor Campbell-Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the alteration of the siting of waste and nitrogen tanks from outside a particular unit at the Albright site in Ardington Road, in Whitchurch, and moving it from outside units 5E to outside unit AB. The application is before committee with a recommendation for approval. Just to make one thing absolutely clear, we have received clarification from the applicants to something which a more, if you like, specific clarification with regard to the fact that the material stored within the tanks would not be subject to hazardous substance consent.
Thank you for that. Maria Adaway and Kevin Holland, please. Sorry? Oh, thank you. Oh, you have 4 minutes. Yeah.
Good evening. My name's Kevin Holland. I'm the Operations Director for Albright International. We have a large operation in Whitchurch, for which we are looking to streamline some of that operation in order that we can retain some of our competitiveness, which is ever ebbing away. Currently we have 2 tanks which provide our brazing department with nitrogen, which is needed for the process. And once the brazing process is completed, we have a tank that takes grey water, which is the water that's used for cleaning the product. It goes through a filtration system. But because it's grey, we can't obviously put it down the drain. That takes care of it, and then we have it taken away with an effluence company. We are a registered ISO 14001 outfit, and because of that, we understand our environmental duties, which we take very seriously, and we also understand our duties regarding our neighbours. And so we have taken all consideration that one would expect to ensure that what we are proposing is in no way, shape or form detrimental to the area. Effectively, we are downsizing this operation, and so both the tanks in question will not only be moved, but they will be a lot smaller than what you see, about 50% of the size of what you see on the photograph. And so they'll move across from one side of the road to the other and be reduced in size. Can't think of anything else to tell you, gentlemen, really. I thought, ladies and gentlemen, I should say. So it's really a question of any questions that you wish to ask me.
Thank you, Mr. Holland.
My pleasure.
Any questions from members? Councillor Potter.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Can I just clarify one thing, because it obviously formed part of the public observations and objections, but when these tanks are refilled, which I think I remember you telling us was a pretty rare occasion in any case, something like every 3 months. And obviously the commentary made in the objection is that would be outside normal working hours and generate significant noise. Well, that apart, I mean, just confirm, if you will, the regularity. It's about 4 times a year, is it? And
I would think it's about every six to 8 weeks that we fill the nitrogen tank. There was a situation, I think about 6 years ago, that our contract is with BOC, and there's a computer attached to that tank that detects when it gets to a level which needs to be reordered, and that pipes straight the way through to BOC. Unbeknown to me and my purchasing department, BOC was coming in and refilling that pretty much as and when they wished. So when they had a vehicle local to the area, it would come in. And one of the residents, Mrs. Pattenden, drew this to my attention. I honestly didn't believe it was happening, but we investigated it again under ISO 14001, and we found out that was the case. And so we've instructed BOC that we will take no deliveries past the hour of 8 o'clock. And that's been in place now for, as I say, I think about certainly 5 years, possibly longer. That would be the noise issue that was brought up as part of Mr. Henderson's rallying of the residents. The only other issue I believe that was on that was one of the pressure release valve and the noise that can make. The best way I could describe a pressure release valve is that on any pressure vessel you need such a valve, and I think I described it to those who visited site last week as a bit like the old-fashioned pressure cooker. And if you have to release the steam every so often, it makes that sudden noise that it does when it escapes. Well, obviously it's going to be on a larger scale, the tank that size, but we have not had that pressure valve go off certainly this year. And it's normally a build-up of the pressure, maybe in the summer conditions if it's particularly warm, and it just vents. But it certainly hasn't gone off this year. And yeah, it is loud when it goes off, but it's very, very infrequent.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Taylor?
So can we just confirm, obviously one of the objections is the noise and disturbance to neighbours. Is that the only noise, appreciable noise that is made? Is the emission
One
every few
we've
months?
cured, and the other one is as I say, that infrequent I couldn't give you a...
So when they're sitting at rest, there's no noise?
No.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you. You say that you're going to be introducing tanks that are going to be about 50% the size of the ones that are currently there. Obviously, you're going to be downsizing the business. Can you please confirm and reassure the committee that the number of times that the nitrogen tank especially will need to be refilled will not increase?
Oh, definitely not. The nitrogen we're using at the moment was for 3 furnaces. One furnace we defunct a long time ago, it was just out of date. The second furnace has been now moved to my other manufacturing plant in Eastern Europe. And the final furnace is the one and only furnace that we're keeping. So over a period of about 3 years, the brazing department, which requires that nitrogen, has reduced by 66%.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Holland? Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Thank you.
Councillor Dunlop, as the ward councillor, do you wish to speak or make a comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Having had personal past experience with the handling of liquid nitrogen tanks, I can inform the committee that when a tank is refilled, what residue in there is discharged, and this is usually carried out over a period of about 1.5 minutes, and that's the noisy period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, where do we go now? Questions to officers? Members? No? No questions to officers? Do we have Councillor Potter, followed by Councillor Miller?
Well, I was hoping to just simplify it, Chair. I mean, from, my viewing and information given to us there and this evening, I just want to move straight away for the approval of this application, Chairman.
Thank you for that.
Seconded.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Those who wish to vote for approval? Unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is approved as per the order paper.
We now move to item number 6, which is Chapel Cottage, Plasto Green, Headley. And I have speakers in the form of Mr. and Mrs. Orr, and officers will present Patricia Logie.
Thank you, Chair. This is a planning application for the construction of a first floor over existing garage store involving raising of the roof and the insertion of windows and roof lights, change to the fenestration details and external materials, and use of the building as a garage and ancillary accommodation.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Orr. You have 4 minutes. I'll give you notice of the last minute.
Thanks for the opportunity to put this in front of you. We probably don't need to have 4 minutes. We're primarily here to answer any questions you might have of it with reference to our application. The application is for a first floor story extension on top of a garage, which used to be a Sunday school building. So it's ancillary space to our home, which we've lived in for the last 7 years. The usage would be as a store, hobby room, place to exercise, study area, garage and tool store.
it's primarily for me to be able to do some home working, so I don't have to travel up to London every day. So it'd have a big impact on my personal life and my ability to spend time in my family environment. That's all I want to say.
Any questions from members? No? Thank you very much. As a ward councillor, I give my approval to this, but I will wait for you members to come into debate. Oh, questions to officers? Did I miss that out? None. Right, debate. Yes, yes. Yes, we have a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour of approval? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Tricia?
I can confirm the application is approved subject to the conditions as listed on the main papers.
Items 7 and 8 are deleted. We therefore move to paper C, which Mike Townsend will speak on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to delay the committee too long, but it's just in terms of paper C is obviously the quarterly appeals update. So I would normally just go through some of the appeal decisions or the most pertinent appeal decisions. Obviously, because we had the Razors Farm decision yesterday, I thought it was right to draw members' attention to that and the outcomes of that. Effectively, as you'll be aware, it was a Secretary of State recovered appeal, so it meant the Secretary of State had final say, informed by an inspector's recommendation. Obviously, the appeal was allowed, i.e. we lost the appeal, and a full award of costs was granted by the Secretary of State on this occasion, which I'll come to in a second. In terms of trying to briefly summarise the main points from the outcomes, the inspector's report, which informed the Secretary of State's decision, noted the position that we've seen before in appeal decisions, that the housing land supply for the council remains a serious and significant situation because we're under the 5-year housing land supply, and that's a key consideration. The inspector and the Secretary of State then did the balancing exercise that we've referred to as well before in terms of benefits against disbenefits. If you like, on the against, so the disbenefits, the inspector found that there was harm to the setting of the listed buildings as heritage assets, and acknowledged the fact that in his view, or the Secretary of State's view, that there can be harm identified to the setting of listed buildings and heritage assets, but that harm was less than substantial. So it's a disbenefit, but not the most weighty disbenefit, if you like. The other disbenefit was the adverse impact on landscape character, which the inspector identified. On the for side, if you like, the benefits were clearly weighed in favour of the application, was the contribution to housing land supply, the 40% affordable housing, the economic development, and also the inspector and Secretary of State made reference to the fact that it was a potential site in the emerging local plan as well, albeit that is caveated by the fact that they then go on to say that limited weight can be applied to that given the stage of consultation that the plan has reached so far. So that was the summary. Other impacts, such as the traffic impact, which is obviously one of the potential reasons for refusal when it came to committee in the first place, the inspector concluded that those and other matters were essentially neutral in the balance. So that was the kind of overall summary of the case. In terms of the costs decision, as you'll be aware, the decision on cost doesn't necessarily follow the decision on the appeal. So you can win or lose an appeal, and you may win or lose on the cost element. In this instance, the Inspector and Secretary of State awarded full costs against the council. To try and sort of keep it brief, if you like, there's one particular paragraph in the Secretary of State's letter, which is only a 2-page letter, but obviously refers to the Inspector's findings, which I think probably sums up the points raised. I'll read it verbatim, it's only a couple of sentences. It says, in particular, he, so the Secretary of State, considers that it was unreasonable behaviour on part of the local authority to fail to grant permission for a development on the site in terms of accessibility and noise, when simultaneously the site was being promoted as a housing allocation in the emerging local plan. If the council had looked for solutions rather than problems and worked proactively to agree conditions in an agreement under Section 106, as the framework seeks to encourage, it may well be that the need for an inquiry could have been obviated altogether. Accordingly, he has decided that a full award of costs is warranted on grounds of unreasonable behaviour on part of the council. So that's bringing together all the issues we talked about in terms of the framework does have the presumption in favour of sustainable development. It does require us to, as a local planning authority, look for solutions in terms of trying to find ways that sort of application can be approved. In terms of the general direction, obviously the picture we're seeing is that we've had 3 major residential inquiries now. Marnell Park, which was refused and then allowed at appeal. There was no cost application there, so we didn't get costs awarded against us. Then had the Kennel Farm appeal, refused. That was allowed on appeal, and a partial award was allowed only on the grounds of not being able to substantiate the prematurity argument. And then on this one, obviously would have been refused because it was an appeal on non-determination, and a full award of costs. So the direction that the Inspectorate and the Secretary of State are taking, I think in terms of this approach is clear. The only other part to report is that officers are now obviously seeking counsel advice as to the implications of this decision as to whether it has any particular issues for other live appeals that we have ongoing at the moment, of which there are 3 in the appeal system.
Thank you, Mike. Members, I would ask you to read, learn and inwardly digest what the inspector is saying, because he's telling us that he's throwing the book at us. And we've got to rethink ourselves, I think. Councillor Miller.
I read all those attachments this afternoon, and one thing slightly annoyed me on this unreasonable behaviour business. We were in the middle of negotiations. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I asked the question at the time. Negotiating, I think there were some highways issues currently ongoing, and it was the developer that went to appeal. We were trying to solve a problem, and that is being thrown back in our face by the inspector, and I'm afraid that rubs me up the wrong way.
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Bound.
This is very concerning and very deep-rooted because, yeah, clearly there are 3 sites there we've been to appeal. This committee, or the committee a lot of us were on anyway, DC, look at the planning application, and I believe we make a judgment, as we pride ourselves in doing. So we have a situation where what is, given the current planning rules and guidelines, the purpose of DC, it's been said before, I know, but it's yet again reinforced, that we've had sites put in our emerging local plan. I would say they've been identified by surveys, clearly by officers, but brought to P&I. There was lots of debate. There was never the detail that we go into with an application in front of us at DC. And so we have a situation where it may never have gone, or these sites may never have made it to our local plan if we'd have had this chance to do it. Now, when we get the chance to do it at DC, we get actually lambasted by the planning inspectorate, because as a council, we're completely mixed up here. So I just can't understand the next time an application comes up, we may find that there are absolutely gaping holes in it. And as you said, this time, well, it'll be probably even quicker an inquiry. So it's mixed messages. It's just very annoying.
Councillor Mrs. Frankham.
A couple of things. One, it's probably a small point, that they keep on saying Marnell Park, and it's very confusing, particularly to the members of the public. If they were to hear you say Marnell Park, I'm assuming you were talking about the Kiln Farm Fields. So, that wants addressing. It just seems to me, and this is a personal view, that we live here. We know the area, we know the roads, we know the people, we take everything, the environment, everything into account. Somebody sitting up in outer Mongolia turns around and says that we're wrong. To me, it's like the difference between I didn't make the last viewing. Now, that actually disadvantages me, because going and viewing puts a whole new light. And I think the inspectors, although they come and have a little look round, they're there for 5 or 10 minutes, like, but they don't know the area. And it does irk me that they come up with these decisions, and here we are spending hours and hours and hours absolutely considering and trying to think of the whole environment. And sometimes you have to say yes when really you'd rather say no, but you think of the good of everybody. Then you've got an inspector who doesn't know, turns around and completely washes away all the work and all the caring that cross-party we have on this development control.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, just briefly, Chairman, I mean, obviously I could express the same angst as other councillors here, and I follow what Councillor Tomlin was saying entirely, really, and I've been as much in the vanguard, I think, of arguing some of these refusals that we've arrived at. But, I mean, the reality is what we're now facing, and it will be the case. It will be the case, I think, in terms of the current Secretary of State and current policy, that we will fall into this trap again in the future if we are not mindful of this, and clearly large amounts of public money will be spent on resisting the appeals of developers. And to that extent, Chairman, we've got to take note of the comment you made, I think, and be as realistic as we can be. But in terms of Razors Farm, I mean, you know, there were, in my view, bona fide arguments that we sought to advance, and it seems distressing to me that those aren't given the merit that we felt they should be, really. But not having a 5-year land supply, the presumption in favour of development, I mean, are going to be overriding factors that we can't ignore. I nearly got to the stage once in full council of trying to move a motion, really, which I guess talked about the impotence of DC, really. Somebody stopped me by moving next business, but having spoken for about 10 minutes himself, I think, at the time, but all that's history now, and I don't think I'll get there again. But we are all frustrated by what we're trying to do, I think, for good reason on behalf of the people that we represent.
Councillor Taylor.
I don't think I am prepared to just roll over for every other application that comes forward. I think there is a principle here that is just deeply disturbing me. And I think maybe if all we can do is, as a committee, perhaps propose to council that we write to the Secretary of State and we express our frustration, because we must be one of many councils who must feel exactly the same way. We've been completely disarmed. And there's something wrong about this whole system. And I'm speaking as, you know, a Tory, and, you know, most of us are. And also invite our 3 MPs to join us in this as well. Seriously, I think one of them at least would. And actually endorse what we're saying and say that something has got to be done, because it's a lengthy process, because of all the systems and all the hoops we have to jump through in order to get a local plan off the ground. And then we're penalised for going through all their flipping hoops. So I think, I don't particularly want to roll over. I think we, as a council, we ought to take some more action on this.
Funnily enough, made this suggestion some while ago that we'd get all 3 MPs and write to Pickles and complain about the way we're being treated, because we are coming up with genuine, decent reasons of why these developments shouldn't go ahead, and also the developers are just putting in half-baked plans which aren't completed. And I think, Michael, you'll have to help me. We'll write a letter.
Obviously, I'll assist the committee in progressing anything they put forward. The one thing I would I'd make, I suppose, in terms of the point, again, entirely understand the point Councillor Tomlin made around, you know, trying to progress the local plan. We've had similar debates around neighbourhood plans as well. I won't go into details, obviously, because we've got outstanding appeals on those very issues. But I think it's the issue of seeing the housing land supply and local plan issue together. You know, we've seen other authorities in similar positions where they've almost got their housing land supply in place. They're at sort of 4.9 years worth of housing land supply, but that's still not enough, even with the local plans in a more progressed state. So I think the clear message is, until the policy, the underlying policy, i.e. the MPPF and everything that feeds from that changes in terms of presumption of favourable favour of sustainable development, then the likelihood is that decisions will be weighed more in favour of progressing development. And it's absolutely critical that we demonstrate as an authority that we have if you like, exhausted all options in terms of trying to find those solutions, whether it be through conditions or Section 106, etc. Albeit that I do accept that at times outline applications do leave a lot of detail to be resolved at a later stage. But I think, again, that's the direction that we're being asked and pushed to go down.
Councillor Tomlin.
No, I'm not trying to increase the debate, but I just have a question. In reading all of the deliberations from the inspector, can you explain this down Grange contribution? Because where's that come from? Oh, totally missed that one.
I'm afraid not, but I can certainly come back to the to the councillors offline. I don't know the exact ins and outs of that. I don't know whether Suzanne can. Just from speaking to Suzanne, who I know is involved with the Section 106 to a lesser extent, sometimes the catchment area for playing fields is taken wider than an open space contribution. It may have been related to that, but I would have to look into the detail. I'm afraid I don't know. So,
right, Councillor Bound.
For the purposes of the webcam, I think Councillor Taylor sort of indicated that I might be a Tory. And I am not.
I was just indicating that we're in a coalition government, as you know.
What? Okay, right. We've got another bit to do, and just a tiny bit. But before we do that, remember we've got 2 wind farms, which will probably come back and hit us too. But Pickles might be more helpful on those. I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of paper C itself, then the only appeal I was really going to draw members' attention to was the enforcement appeal against enforcement notice for land at Cufford Lane, which is a Gypsy and Traveller site occupied by mobile homes. In summary, the appeal was actually dismissed, so i.e. the council won the appeal. In doing so, we did acknowledge the need for Gypsy and Traveller provision, but effectively argued that the overriding issues on this instance was that the site was within a floodplain. There was very clear local knowledge on that and evidence on that to demonstrate the issues, along with access considerations and the fact that the access was considered potentially dangerous. On that basis, the inspector agreed with the council that outweighed the need for the development. The one element to note, though, is that the council proposed an enforcement period for compliance of 3 months. The inspector extended that to 12 months on the basis of the personal circumstances of the existing occupants. So it's something that, from an enforcement point of view, we were seeking to resolve quickly, but the inspector actually extended it to 12 months, taking into account personal considerations, which through human rights is absolutely appropriate to do.
Good. Is that it? Thank you all very much indeed. Good, and good night.